Episode 6 ended in 1972 with the formation of the John Kay Band and the recording of my first solo album, Forgotten Songs and Unsung Heroes. That record, produced by Richie Podler and engineered by Bill Cooper, has a warm, full sound and features, in addition to some forgotten song covers, a couple of very personal songs. I've always had a "my private life is none of your business" attitude, so writing these personal songs was a new experience for me. That album is still one of my favorite recordings, a testament to the fine musicianship of George Biondo, Kent Henry, and two Canadians, Hugh O'Sullivan on keyboards and drummer Penty Glenn, whose playing was exceptional, particularly on I'm Movin' On, which was released as a single and received significant airplay. So, with the album climbing the charts and the single on the radio, we set off to play some showcase venues. First, my old stomping ground, the Troubadour in West Hollywood, and after playing Chicago and Atlanta, the Bitter End in New York. One night, after finishing our show with I'm Movin' On, Odetta came into the dressing room and excitedly said, "The way you guys play that song is great, but it ends much too soon. Just when you're really cooking, you should play it longer." Well, she was right, and from then on, we extended the ending by staying in the groove much longer. But that night, I was simply pleased that this renowned woman with the extraordinarily powerful voice that I first heard at the Troubadour in 1964, and whom I greatly admired, thought enough of our playing to walk right in and tell us so. Following these showcase venues, we played the Bill Russell television show. Bill, who is well known for his astounding record by basketball players everywhere, was a congenial host. After our performance, I sat with Bill and fellow guests, Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, and Sally Struthers, who is well known for her role in the hugely popular All in the Family TV show. Bill asked about my early years in East and West Germany, etc. In short, we had a pleasant, enjoyable conversation. A few days later, we were in Toronto to appear on Rollin' on the River, a syndicated TV show hosted by Kenny Rogers and the first edition. I believe we played I'm Movin' On, but I'm not certain. The next morning, Jerry Sloan, our tour manager, knocked on my door. "Hey, John, you got to see this. I don't know what to do." He led me to Hugh O'Sullivan's room. Its door wide open, we walked in and found a young woman with an Afghan dog who said, "I've been trying, but I can't wake him up." Hugh was in a fetal position, wrapped in a bedsheet and out cold. We had a flight to catch, so after failing to revive him, Jerry crushed a couple of uppers in an ashtray and then, using a rolled-up dollar bill, blew the pulverized amphetamine up his nose. That did the trick. After a couple of minutes, he came around, just in time for us to make our flight home to L.A. Meanwhile, an agent from London had arrived with offers for Steppenwolf to play in Europe. When told that Steppenwolf was retired, he said, "Okay, then how about doing a farewell tour? The offers are really good." I said, "I'll do it, provided John Kay Band is the support act," thinking this was an opportunity to promote my solo album in Europe. Everyone agreed, and off to London we flew. We first played the Edmonton Sundown Theatre in North London, and then at the Buxton Pop Festival. 2 days later, we boarded a de Havilland airplane and took off to play in Norway and Sweden, followed by shows in Denmark and then Frankfurt, Germany, where Penty was so loaded that he fell off his drum stool during the K-Band show. He then met German actress Christina Kaufmann, recently divorced from American movie star Tony Curtis, and was having way too much fun with Christina on his arm while drinking remarkable quantities of vodka. Hugh O'Sullivan increasingly consumed drugs, which had become a significant problem. And after Kent Henry and Jerry Edmonton had a major altercation, it became quite clear that the K-Band was falling apart. Nevertheless, we completed the tour playing Munich, Amsterdam, Hamburg, and finally several dates in England, including Newcastle, Liverpool, Birmingham, and Manchester. Then, on our flight to London, to connect with our flight home to L.A., Hugh O'Sullivan passed out and had to be taken off the plane on a stretcher. Don't know what he had taken, but I do know it was the last time I saw him. Eventually, I learned that he had returned to Canada. After a short break at home, I resumed recording my second solo album entitled My Sportin' Life. With the K-Band now history, Richard Podler, my producer, brought in well-known session players. Lee Sklar on bass, Russ Kunkel on drums, guitarist Danny Korchmar, and Mike Utley on keyboards, and also singers, Shirley Matthews, Vanetta Fields, and lastly, Gloria Jones, whose sensuous voice gave the track Easy Evil a special, intimate tone. Another track that turned out well was Drift Away.
Give me the beat, boys, free my soul. I want to get lost in the rock and roll and drift away.
Which we had finished weeks before Dobie Gray's version became a major hit. We had urged Dunhill Records to release Drift Away as a single, but instead the label released Moonshine Friend of Mine. Despite that, I still like a few tracks on that album, particularly My Sportin' Life and also Dance to My Song, which is my farewell to a dear friend. When I had time off between recording sessions, Jutta and I would go to the Troubadour Bar for drinks, or to the Whiskey to hear other artists, or to Canned Heat's Invitational Bowling Tournament. Canned Heat was a well-known LA blues band who were avid bowlers. We arrived at Hollywood's La Cienega Lanes, where the party was already in full swing, and various music industry types tried their hand at bowling. There was the Rock of Ages team, Alvin Lee's 10 Years After team, the Beatles press agent Derek Taylor, Steppenwolf's publicist Gary Stromberg, the Hollywood Argyles team, and more. Jutta and I simply watched the often comical bowling attempts, as did Bette Midler, Cheech and Chong, Jackie DeShannon, Dusty Springfield, and several others. Not surprisingly, Canned Heat won their own tournament. Well, that was more or less expected, and it didn't matter, because a very good time was had by all, for this was the time when cocaine was everywhere and booze and blow were the norm. After a short recovery, I was back in the studio to finish the Sportin' Life album, which was released in 1973 and with minimal promotion never got off the ground. So, what to do next? On the flight home from the so-called farewell tour in Europe, Jerry Edmonton and I decided we might give Steppenwolf another shot after I finished my Sportin' Life album. With that LP dead in the water and Kent Henry out of the picture, Jerry and I asked Bobby Cochran, an excellent guitarist and nephew of rockabilly legend Eddie Cochran, to join the Wolf. Luckily, Bobby accepted our offer and soon had our songs under his belt. His first gig as a new member was to play my ill-fated single Moonshine Friend of Mine with the rest of Steppenwolf on the NBC TV show Midnight Special.
I said I'd never do the town again, but here I go, I'm painting it red. Forgetting all the easy words I said, now I'm walking out the door, I just gotta get some more of that moonshine, Tennessee wine, running around my head. Moonshine, friend of mine, help me to find my bed.
After that performance, Jerry, Goldie, George, Bobby, and I went into my studio and began working on material for a new Steppenwolf album. Meanwhile, our management team had broken up, and Bobby Roberts, who had managed the Mamas and Papas, agreed to represent us. We first asked Bobby to negotiate a release from Dunhill Records. We no longer felt Dunhill was solidly behind us, and we wanted to try our luck elsewhere. That elsewhere turned out to be Bobby Roberts' own Mums Records, an independent label distributed by Epic/CBS Records. He offered us a 5-album deal with very significant royalty advances for each delivered LP. We gladly signed his excellent offer and then returned to my studio to continue songwriting. Bobby Roberts, meanwhile, was working on Steppenwolf media events. One of these was Billboard magazine's International Talent Forum held in March 1974 at UCLA. The discussion panel, which I moderated, included record producer, composer Quincy Jones, Frank Zappa, Richard Carpenter of the Carpenters, singer-songwriter Jackie DeShannon, and myself. The panel's lively and at times tense discussions focused primarily on the state of the music industry. At one point, Richard Carpenter and Frank Zappa got into a heated exchange about artistic integrity versus commercial success. After things settled down, I congratulated Frank on the success of his Apostrophe album, which had just reached number 10 on the Billboard album charts, to which he replied, accidents will happen. Well, Apostrophe was indeed the exception, for it became the most commercially successful recording of his career. After this brief Billboard Forum diversion, it was back to songwriting in the studio. Soon, with the help of engineer Ed Bannon, we started recording our new material and were encouraged by the results. The album became a real group effort, with everyone contributing a song or two. My contributions were Justice, Don't Be Slow, and Children of the Night. Both songs have topical lyrics about the Watergate break-in scandal, the disgrace of President Nixon, his resignation, and the demise of the Woodstock Nation. Once the tracks and vocals were ready to be mixed, we moved to the Sound Factory studio in Hollywood and completed what became our Slow Flux album. Following the album's release in August 1974, things were shaping up quite well. The reviews were mainly positive, promotion was in full swing with radio airplay and a billboard on Sunset Boulevard, etc. The album's first single, Straight Shootin' Woman, written by drummer Jerry Edmonton, made it into the Billboard Top 30, while the LP reached the Top 50. Not great, but a decent beginning for the reassembled Steppenwolf. Meanwhile, our agency had booked over 30 U.S. and Canadian Steppenwolf tour dates. Once on the road, we were pleased to find that our fans had not forgotten us. Most shows were sold out, and our fans greeted us with much enthusiasm. By the end of 1974, we needed a break and spent the holidays with our families at home. The new year, 1975, began for us in February when we hosted the Midnight Special TV show. We played Children of the Night and Born to be Wild. Our fellow performers were Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters, and Linda Ronstadt. The show's announcer was Wolfman Jack, who later became a good friend. I had already met him earlier for an interview at the XERB radio studio in L.A. XERB, known as the Mighty 1090, sent its 250,000 watts border blaster signal from a transmission tower in Rosarito, Mexico, all the way up to Alaska, making Wolfman Jack a living radio legend for untold thousands all along the West Coast. He was so well known that George Lucas had Wolfman play himself in American Graffiti, a film predating Lucas's Star Wars success. Now, despite a promising beginning, the rest of 1975 brought major setbacks. the first of which was the firing of Goldie McJohn. This was a difficult decision for us to make, for not only was Goldie a founding member, but his unique way of playing organ was an important part of the Steppenwolf sound. Unfortunately, his constant and increasing drug use made his playing erratic and too often unusable. His behavior both on and off stage had become embarrassing. He was constantly morose and appeared to be deeply troubled, and his use of psychedelics made his condition even worse. Consequently, we felt it necessary to replace him, for the Slow Flux album had run its course, and we were preparing to record the next LP. It was our bass player, George Biondo, who suggested Andy Chapin as Goldie's replacement. Andy Chapin was easygoing, a fine keyboardist, and easy to like. So with new life in the band, we got busy writing and gathering material for what became the Hour of the Wolf album. Meanwhile, our manager Bobby Roberts and his partner Hal Landers were riding a wave of success as producers of Death Wish, a film starring Charles Bronson. Death Wish was a major box office success, and Bobby Roberts decided to leave the music business in order to focus on filmmaking. Consequently, he shut down Mums Records and moved its artists, including Steppenwolf, to Epic Records, which was Mums' distributor. He also retired from artist management, leaving us without a manager. In an effort to take Epic's temperature regarding Steppenwolf's future at Epic, our business manager, Don Sterling, and I flew to New York for a meeting at Black Rock with the head of Epic Records. Rarely have I been as unimpressed as I was with the corporate suit that was in charge of the label. His barely concealed resentment of having Steppenwolf dropped in his lap, so to speak, made it clear that the Hour of the Wolf LP would receive little, if any, promotional support. Despite this unfortunate development, upon my return to LA, we continued recording our new album. It would be a month or two before we were ready to mix the record. During that time, Jutta and I decided to clean up our act. We were both 31 at this point and felt it was time to get into shape. We quit smoking and using cocaine, and Jutta got deeply into Shotokan karate. She trained at the dojo 5 nights a week for 13 years to get her second-degree black belt. We also went to the Holiday Spa Health Club in Hollywood 3 mornings a week for strength and cardio training. One morning at the club, a guy pumping irons said, "Are you the guy in Steppenwolf?" When I said yes, he invited me to come to a movie lot the next day where the crew planned to film a scene with him punching hanging beef in a walk-in freezer. I was leaving the next day and declined the offer. I later discovered it was Sylvester Stallone who had invited me. He was in the midst of shooting Rocky, his first and enormously successful film. Now back to the recording studio. Once Hour of the Wolf was ready, Jerry and I flew to San Francisco to have the renowned Roy Halley mix the album. Roy was the engineer and producer of Simon & Garfunkel's many albums, and in 1966 he had engineered our Sparrow demos for Columbia Records, and we were glad to see him again. After Roy finished mixing the album, we delivered it to Epic Records. They released Hour of the Wolf in September 1975 and predictably gave the record minimal promotion. We tried to compensate for this by playing 25 dates until mid-December, but to no avail. The Hour of the Wolf had run out of time by then. Andy Chapin, who had missed his wife Lisa and home life while on the road, decided to leave Steppenwolf. In light of these unfortunate developments, we decided to record the next album as soon as possible, knowing full well it would be dead on arrival at Epic Records. Why would we do this? Because the recording contract Epic Records inherited from Mums obligated Epic to pay very substantial royalty advances upon delivery of each album. That's why. We were very unhappy with Epic and determined to make them pay. So back into my studio we went, and with the help of Wayne Cook on keyboards, recorded the Skullduggery LP. Bobby wrote the title song and Life is a Gamble, while George contributed a song called Sleep, and the rest were outside songs, and 2 covers, Junior Walker's I'm a Roadrunner and Pass It On by the Wailers, both of which I suggested and enjoyed singing. Jerry Edmonton then designed the LP's cover, and off it went to Epic, which let Skullduggery escape in May 1976. We had received the required advance upon delivery of the album, and our lawyers then asked when Epic would like the 4th and 5th albums delivered. The label decided to cut its losses, paid us a sizable settlement, and canceled our recording contract. I felt greatly relieved that the Epic fiasco was now behind us, and went on family trips with Jutta and Sean, who had not seen much of her father in the previous years. After several of these excursions, I began writing again, and once I had 10 songs ready, my friend Morgan Cabot booked time at Heritage Recording to lay down some tracks with him co-producing. The following musicians played on the ensuing recording sessions: drummers Jerry Edmonton and Steve Palmer, bass players Kenny Blanchette and Jack Ryland, guitarists Michael Palmer and Lowell George, pianists Wayne Cook, Bill Payne, and Nicky Hopkins, the Tower of Power horns, and singers Clyde King, Vanetta Fields, and Shirley Matthews. These recordings did not find a home at the time, but were eventually released by Rainman Records in 1997 as the Lost Heritage Tapes. However, Mercury Records offered me a label deal after hearing these tracks, provided I was willing to re-record them in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, a hot recording mecca in the 70s, at Wishbone Studios, with owners Terry Woodford and Clayton Ivey as producers. The Wishbone Studio had a relaxed vibe, and the musicians, which included ex-Steppenwolf guitarist Larry Byram, were excellent. The sessions went well, and my All in Good Time LP was completed within weeks and released by Mercury in February 1978. But by then, the A&R man who had signed me to the label had been fired, making my new album an orphan project at Mercury with zero chances of getting label support. British rocker Graham Parker seems to have had a similar experience, hence his recording titled Mercury Poisoning. In any case, All in Good Time was now out, and I wanted to play these songs live with a band. It was drummer Steve Palmer and his brother guitarist Michael Palmer who suggested bass player Curtis Teal and keyboardist Danny Ironstone as members of a new John Kay band. We soon played clubs up and down California, performing material from my 3 solo LPs, but no Steppenwolf songs, which was intentional. Then we discovered that Nick St. Nicholas and Goldie McJohn were performing with others as Steppenwolf, not only in the U.S., but also in Europe. I was furious because they did not have the right to use the name. Lawsuits back and forth finally came to an end when a compromise agreement was signed. However, the agent representing what Jerry Edmonton and I called the bogus wolf was a shady character who broke the new agreement within weeks and then continued booking the same imposter outfit anyway. Later on, in an unrelated matter, he went to prison for interstate wire fraud. For Jerry and I, as principals of Steppenwolf Incorporated, the legal system became a version of whack-a-mole. We were told we would have to sue the bogus wolf in every single state it performed in, which was absurd and a non-starter. I was so enraged by this that I called Jerry and said, The Steppenwolf name is being destroyed as we speak. The feedback about their shows is terrible. The fans feel ripped off. My band and I are ready to drive these guys out of business by competing with them state by state as John Kay and Steppenwolf. The fans know who I am and that I will bring the goods. We gotta do this now before it's too late to rescue and restore the name. I offered him a percentage of my band's performance fees, and he reluctantly agreed. So in January 1980, after replacing Curtis Teal with Chad Perry on bass, John Kay and Steppenwolf hit the road, with the band traveling in the Kay family's custom van and the gear in Steve Palmer's old cargo van, which he called the Crippler. Had I known how long it would take to restore the name and reputation of Steppenwolf, I might have had second thoughts. But we were now grinding it out in clubs night after night, week after week, and there was no turning back. On the next episode, the endless touring begins to pay off. We're playing better venues with more and more sellouts. We fly to Europe for a short tour, and then later to Australia for 6 weeks of coast-to-coast touring. By 1981, we are recording again and release the Wolf Tracks album and the single Hot Night in a Cold Town. MTV, which was a new thing in 1981, and a big deal, then plays our video of the single Hot Night. In 1984, with Richie Podler as producer, we record the Paradox album and are beginning to feel that playing the long game to rebuild Steppenwolf is working and that there's much, much more to come. So until then, as always, stay well and stay wild.
Thank you for joining us on Rockstar to Wildlife Advocate from wherever you get your podcasts and from our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/RSTWA. Be sure to follow us and don't forget to subscribe for free so you won't miss any upcoming episodes. Rockstar to Wildlife Advocate is brought to you in part by the Mao K Foundation. We hope to see you again on the next episode of Rockstar to Wildlife Advocate.